When the body needed structure, how SAFECHAIN was born. This podcast is to cover the bridge between survival tools and SAFECHAIN. In the deeply personal episodes that I shared with you in my vulnerable parts, I reflect on the moments when I recorded silent screams, loud strength, simply to keep my nervous system steady during the chaos of legal battles, institutional fragmentation. So what began as grounding, practical, tools slowly revealed something deeper, the absence of structure across safeguarding systems. From that, I realized, and SAFECHAIN was born, a framework designed to restore procedural coherence across police, courts, housing, healthcare, and legal institutes. This episode explores how healing structure, and policy reform are more connected than we realize. So hello and welcome back to Silent Screams, Loud Strength. I'm your host, as always, Samantha. This episode, in a very simple way, it was not a strategy. It was not a media platform creation. It was survival. There were moments when my nervous system was so overwhelmed by the fragmentation of the systems around me that the only thing I could do was sit quietly and speak into a microphone. Not to teach, not to influence, but to stabilize my own body. The podcast became a regulation space for me, a place where my breathing could slowly slow down, where my thoughts could organize themselves, where my voice could exist without interruption. And in those moments of quiet, recording, sometimes something else began to emerge. Not just healing, but clarity. The moment the pattern became visible to me, when you move through trauma, you start noticing patterns that others cannot see. You see how one institute says one thing, another institute says another. The courts require documentation that another agency never provided. A housing authority makes a decision based on information that the police never recorded. They never recorded properly. It never existed really. A doctor documents symptoms, but the legal system dismisses them. It begins to feel like you are moving through a maze of disconnected systems, each one operating independently, each one claiming to protect you, but none of them speaking to each other, and slowly realizing that this is a really traumatic system to follow. The problem, not always the law, the problem is fragmentation between the systems that implement the law. That is when SAFECHAIN began to form. SAFECHAIN was not born in a boardroom. SAFECHAIN was not created inside a consultancy firm. It was not designed by a policy committee. It emerged from lived experience, deeply painful, traumatic experience, from sitting in my car, recording my podcasts, writing my books, from walking between institutes that could have never been coordinated in a way that would help me. They dismissed me not only from my color, from being a woman, from watching how trauma becomes worse when systems fail to communicate. SAFECHAIN began as a question. What would safeguarding look like if the systems actually spoke to each other properly? What if documentation followed the survivor of domestic abuse or a traumatized individual? What if procedural handovers were actually structured? What if accountability traveled across institutions? Healing requires structure. There is something many policymakers do not yet understand. Trauma is not only emotional, it is procedural. When survivors encounter fragmented systems, the body experiences that fragmentation as instability. When procedures are unclear, the nervous system becomes hyperactive. When documentation disappears between institutes, survivors must relive their story repeatedly. That's re-traumatization. This is procedural trauma. SAFECHAIN recognizes something very simple. Healing is supported not only by therapy, it is supported by structure. Structure reduces uncertainty. Structure creates orientation. Structure restores dignity. So you ask, what is SAFECHAIN? Actually, SAFECHAIN is not just an idea, it is a safeguarding infrastructure. It is a governance. It is a governance spine designed to support interagency protocol alignment, documentation continuity, procedural hand-off structures, accountability, mapping, safeguarding, interoperability. It sits between institutes, not replacing them, but connecting them. It is a safeguarding architecture. Why this work cannot be ignored? Because fragmentation has consequences. When safeguarding systems operate in silos, evidence becomes lost, accountability becomes diluted, survivors become exhausted, perpetrators exploit the gaps in the systems. SAFECHAIN exists to close those gaps, and it exists because someone had to build it. So, this podcast began as a place where my nervous system could rest, but it became a space where patterns could be seen. And from those patterns, a structure emerged. SAFECHAIN is not just a framework. It is a result of lived experience meeting structural thinking. And sometimes the most powerful innovation do not come from institutions. They come from the quiet moments when someone finally asks, why are these systems not working together? So, SAFECHAIN is here to stay, and SAFECHAIN is here to help you orient your life. And if you are listening today and your life feels fragmented, take a slow breath, please. Notice the ground beneath your feet. Let your body know how to return to stability. Structure begins with small anchors: breath, awareness, voice, and sometimes from those small acts and small anchors, the entire system can be rebuilt. Thank you for being part of my journey.